Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Beyond the Headlines. Today, we take a closer look at the stories shaping our communities and our future, going past the surface, the context, the impact, and the conversations that matter.
In every episode, we move past what's trending and examine what the headlines truly mean for everyday Filipinos.
I'm Mildred Galarpe.
And I'm DJ Moises.
Today on Beyond the Headlines, we focus on the sinkholes that have appeared in Bogo City and San Remigio and the other northern towns following the powerful earthquake that struck northern Cebu on September 30, 2025. These sudden ground collapses have raised concerns among residents and local officials, prompting calls for a thorough geological assessment and immediate safety measures.
To help us understand what's happening and what might come next, we're joined by Dr. Karlo Queaño, Chief Geologist at the DENR-Mines and Geosciences Bureau, and Josephine Aleta, Supervising Geologist from DENR-MGB Region 7. They will shed light on the causes of sinkholes, the potential risks to nearby communities, and the actions being taken to monitor and mitigate further geological hazards in the area.
Well, we're still reaching out. Nato pang gitawgan si Dr. Queaño. Kanang ano lang ko sa gidaghanon.
Yes.
Why 70 murag unsa man ka ang how big ang ilang na monitor o unsa pud ang pinakagamay o ang pinakadako.
And are they interconnected?
Oh,
potentially, no?
Kuan basad kanang can we say nga despite the aftershocks mo na ni sila or mo continue pa ni sila og collapse? Sana siya. Another thing is with the burn months nga naay bagyo and everything
And rain.
how will this kuan sa safety sa atong sinkholes?
And
Diba?
is there a required distance
Anyway,
from the existing sinkholes that should require no build or evacuation also?
Kinsa ni si? Okay, I think Dr. Karlo is now on the line. Dr. Queaño, good afternoon.
Good afternoon po.
Hi, there you go. So thank you for your time in joining us this afternoon. Just we have a few questions regarding the existence of sinkholes.
Yes po.
Itong mga sinkholes in northern Cebu, is this something normal or is 70 an average number, or are we
Is it-
above
yeah.
or under normal?
Well, ito po, when we talk about normal po, geologically, somehow it's normal in the sense po, sinkholes develop in limestone areas, lalo na kung flat yung terrain po. Ano ho. So, unfortunately, many areas in Cebu, not just for northern Cebu, but as well as the western and eastern flank of Cebu, and even the southern part, are underlain po ng limestone. Kaya even before the earthquake, may mga sinkholes na po na-identify ang DENR-Mines and Geosciences Bureau po. So geologically, it's normal.
Okay. But as to the number of sinkholes in northern Cebu right after the earthquake, this shows na yung the limestone composition of the Cebu soil talaga.
Yes po, kasi po yung sinkholes po, nade-develop po yan sa mga limestone nga po. Kasi ang limestone, they are actually soluble, nadi-dissolve po siya unti-unti ng tubig ulan, which is slightly acidic. So kung may fracture po tayo sa surface, dun papasok yung tubig, tapos magiging papalaki yung mabutas sa ilalim. Kaya nga po tayo may underground caves. And eventually, kapag hindi na na-support yung ibabaw, magkukulapse and it becomes sinkhole. In fact nga po, even before the earthquake, we have identified hundreds of sinkholes sa buong Cebu po.
Okay.
And when you said, Doc Ba, about fractures,
Yes
does
po.
this also mean that the fractures were created or were they triggered by the earthquake?
Actually po, fractures can be triggered by earthquakes. But remember po, especially for the Philippines, it's quite normal for rocks to be fractured kasi we are in a seismically active area. So marami pong, we experience a lot of earthquakes. So of course, there are situations that it's not just about earthquake, the earthquake that causes fractures. So that's the reason why for Cebu, when you have a relatively flat terrain, then it's underlain by limestone, and if limestone is fractured, then it's very prone to what we call sinkhole formation and eventual, of course, ground subsidence po.
And then you've mentioned, but just to also manage perception from the general public, you've mentioned that even before the earthquake, there were already sinkholes, no, that
100,
were
100 sinkholes identified.
discovered.
Actually po, it's more than 100 sinkholes po in-identify. We're not yet complete for assessing the inventory of the of sinkholes all throughout Cebu, but we have done a significant work already in the southern half of Cebu, and we've also started sa northern Cebu even before the earthquakes po. So the maps that are which we call the car subsidence maps ay meron na po tayong available po dyan, and we have already also relayed the reports to the LGUs po concerned.
So given what you are seeing ba, based on the ongoing assessment, not just in the northern part of Cebu, but the entire kanang province, are we seeing a pattern as of today that a lot of them are surfacing from the north? Or is
No.
it insufficient data for us to make a conclusion?
Actually po, the trend right now is that it's actually just in the limestone area. So there's no some sort of a bias if it's distributed in the north or if it's distributed in the south. In the first place, we are not yet done with the inventory of all the sinkholes in the northern part.
Okay.
But what is very, very clear is that when you talk about sinkhole formation in Cebu, not just in Cebu, but also in Bohol, as well in Negros or in other areas in the Philippines that are underlain by limestone, okay, especially if these limestones are relatively young or not so compacted, then sinkhole is quite a common, it's
Okay.
becoming a common geological feature po.
With the kind of composition, soil composition in
Yes po.
Cebu or even the Philippines, how safe then are high-rise buildings?
Actually po, when you talk about sinkholes, which is a very good question, kasi when you have underground caves or mga butas or caverns or vugs, what engineers do is that they use they implement what we call grouting. Yung grouting para pong they fill in the void to avoid or to minimize ground subsidence or eventual ground collapse. So there are some engineering measures to actually mitigate that kind of problem. The problem though is for the small entities or mga like for houses,
Yes.
Kasi nga syempre, grouting is not cheap. It's very, very expensive. And that's the reason why it's important to map out all these sinkholes, to map out all those caverns or underground caves. And as much as possible, we avoid these areas for construction po.
Okay.
And then going back to the North Band, the question is in the context of whether there are certain places that are more prone compared to the others. So if I'm going to look at the breakdown of the 70 new sinkholes that are found in northern Cebu, Bogo, which is the epicenter, has actually 16. And then Sanrem, which is not the epicenter, actually has the highest number, which is 40.
Apo. So as I have said po, kasi nga ho, it's not just the earthquake. Earthquake is a triggering mechanism po to cause the ground collapse and the formation of the sinkhole. But it's just one of the mechanisms po. So it doesn't have to have, you don't actually need an earthquake really to form a sinkhole. But of course, the earthquake could hasten the process.
Okay.
Siyempre ho, di ba? When you have already an existing vugs or cavities underneath even before the earthquake, and if the earthquake comes, then that could cause the eventual collapse. So it would hasten the process.
And then given the disparity then of the number, for the lack of better word, can we say that San Remigio is an area of focus compared to that of Bogo in the context of sinkholes?
Can you repeat the question? I could hardly hear it from my end.
Sorry. Given the difference ba in terms of the number of sinkholes that were found after the earthquake, can we already say that San Remigio is an area of focus in the context of sinkhole compared to locations such as Bogo?
I would not say that as early as now because
Okay.
first of all, we need to know what is in the subsurface. And that's the reason
Okay.
why the Mines and Geosciences Bureau of the DNR is also conducting what we call a geophysical survey or a specifically ground penetrating radar to identify these cavities below the surface. Okay, so these cavities are very important so that these are areas that would have that potential to develop these sinkholes and eventual ground subsidence po.
Okay. Now, I think in Sanrem, I know ang MGB and DNR is still. Have you done with the assessment now for the province of Cebu?
Not yet po. In fact, we sent another team kasi pagod na rin yung the first team eh. So we brought another team and so far they have actually identified, this new team identified 24 new sinkholes in Bogo City and San Remigio. Okay, so it's not just about the sinkholes but we're also identifying together with the FIVOLs, the earthquake-induced landslides because these kind of landslide can be remobilized in the form of rain-induced landslides, especially when another weather disturbance comes in.
Yes. In relation to that statement, Doc,
Yes
is
po.
sa Burma, sa Cebu, dito talaga, I mean, dito yung most of the typhoons na papasok. The last quarter of the year. So how, ano yung relationship ng weather disturbance, I mean, storms for that matter, and the existing sinkholes and yung mga earthquake-induced landslides?
Actually po, in relation to the weather disturbance, kung pababa siya, I'm not so confident about that because what happened right now is because of the climate change. It's really difficult right now
Yes.
to forecast where the weather disturbance or a typhoon would be crossing. But kung yung sa mga earthquake nga, that's the reason why we are very concerned of that. It's not just about the Cebu, but all other parts of the Philippines because there are a lot of unstable areas that we have identified that need attention regardless if this is earthquake-induced or not. So, of course, we want to focus on the efforts for Cebu and Davao because at this point in time, these are the populations that really need the assistance because obviously it will be a cascading hazards, right, from earthquake. And then when you have weather disturbance, that could also might hasten the dissolution process.
Yes.
So ganun po. So that's why nga we have a team right now in Cebu to assist the local government units po.
And then what are we advising the houses that are
Yes.
near these sinkholes?
Yes po. Well, first of all, they have to monitor their area. There are indications of a possible ground subsidence and sinkhole development. If they see their flooring, parang developing some depression, and then they see their walls tilting, and even the trees tilting, even though that their ground is relatively flat, then that can be an indication that there might be some sort of a set of cavities doon po sa ilalim, and that is a very good indication of sinkhole. Also, during rain, pag may rains, if there are rains, and if they see some ponded areas, that can also indicate some depression where there are potential sinkholes. So, as much as possible, if you see that, then they have to really inform the DENR-Mines and Geosciences Bureau to check on their side. But of course, when they see a sinkhole, let's just not construct on a sinkhole and do not throw trash in the sinkhole or even fill in the sinkholes.
How about distance from the existing sinkhole?
How safe?
yeah.
Ano yung safe zone from existing sinkholes for for public to roam around or to construct new houses or buildings? Ano yung safe distance, whether small or big sinkholes?
Okay, it's not just about houses, no? Kasi depende sa structure na yan eh.
Yes.
Like for light structures, what we are recommending right now, okay, when I say light structures, mga one-story, yung mga bahay basically, is 10 meters from the edge of the deformation or ground of instability. When I say that, kasi you can have a sinkhole and then immediately beside it would be some cracks. Diba? Pwede ko kasi may fractures or some sort of a depression. Yung edge ng depression or cracks, then you measure about 10 meters. That is the current buffer zone that we are putting right now.
Okay. And then, Doc, how, like, Fivox earlier explained to us si Dr. Bakulkol that
Yes po.
continue pa talaga yung aftershocks in the next 3 months after the quake. So,
Yes po.
Kasi it's Fivox and Mines and Geosciences Bureau who will give out the report when we can start rehabilitation, constructions, and everything.
Yes po. Yes po.
So when is the do we have a timeline, like when is the safe time for people to start building or yung rehabilitation effort?
Actually po, we are working under the arm of the Office of Civil Defense under the DENR-MGB. So the Office of Civil Defense is coordinating all the efforts of the government. Because when you talk about rehabilitation, recovery, it's a whole government approach.
Yes.
Kasi nga po, like for example, when you talk about relocation, you need to identify lots. But at the same time, there should be a provision for livelihood. Kasi
Yes.
otherwise, if there's no livelihood, people will just go back.
Yes.
So it's not an easy task. And the MGB, as well as FIVOLs, are not capable of doing that alone. That's why we are working under the arm of the Office of Civil Defense, particularly the DENR-MGB or the National Disaster Risk Reduction Management Council po.
Okay. Now, as at least with the limited knowledge that I have, Doc Ba, the sinkholes, they vary in sizes. Some are smaller
Yes, po.
compared to the others. Can you educate lay person like me,
us.
no,
Yeah.
or like us,
Okay po.
about what is the technology that's being used to assess whether the size of the sinkhole is already the size or this is a sinkhole that is yet to grow bigger?
Yeah, or
Yes
it's a
po.
progressing
Oo.
movement.
Maybe I would just start first what a limestone is because
Yes.
many of
Sige.
our
I think.
kababayan doesn't know. So limestone essentially is used as a raw material for cement, which Cebu has a lot. So kapag namatay, for example po yung mga coral reefs, diba? We are surrounded by coral reefs. When they die, and then they get exposed on the surface, they would form a rock called limestone. So yun po siya. And limestone, as I have said, is very prone to dissolution by acidic waters. So yung acidic waters, yung rainwater is lightly acidic. That's why we do have all of this. Now, in order to identify or to know whether a sinkhole has that capability of growing further, it is important for us to know what is in the subsurface. Obviously, we do not see the subsurface, but we can indirectly investigate it by using what we call geophysics. So we run an instrument, one of which is the ground penetrating radar, that allows us to identify these potential cavities or vugs that could translate later into a sinkhole and potential ground subsidence po. So yun po. So even with a sinkhole, underneath a sinkhole, there can be additional fractures around it or beneath it, and that can again translate to a bigger sinkhole po.
Okay, related pa din dyan sa explanation, Doc. So, pwede ma-explain mo further the process by which ground shaking dun sa Bogo Bay Fault earthquake triggered the so many subsidence, yung naglabasan lahat yung mga
Formation.
sinkholes.
Yes po, kasi nga The ground shaking, which is as a result of that earthquake, a fault movement, okay, the Bogo Bay fault, no, is already, it's basically just triggered it. What do I say by triggered? Kasi dun sa mga areas that already collapsed, obviously there were cavities before. Hindi pa lang siya bumibigay yung sa surface niya. So especially if the layer between the cavity o yung butas at saka sa ibabaw ay manipis na, the more that is actually prone to collapse. So ground shaking can initiate that collapse. And that's what we see right now, di ba? So there are a number of ways of triggering a formation of a sinkhole. The natural dissolution is one, the enlargement of the cavities, and of course the earthquake,
Okay.
which is the ground shaking.
So
po.
with the aftershocks like what we experienced last Monday, there's a
Yes po.
magnitude 5.8. Did mag-i-influence ba siya on the stability or the growth of more existing sinkholes?
Well, there's that possibility because one shaking event can cause just a fracturing, di ba? Then another ground shaking can cause further instability. Then the third ground shaking now can third or fourth, whichever point lang is that whenever there's a ground shaking, the tendency of that is just to weaken the rock, di ba? The stability of the surface.
Yes.
So eventually, mag-collapse yan kapag there would be succeeding mga aftershocks.
Movements.
No?
Okay.
But again, that would really depend on the properties ng bato and secondly, kung gaano pa kapal na titirang bato between dun sa cavity at saka doon sa taas.
Okay, Doc. Kasi sabi mo, Cebu is really a limestone, majority is limestone talaga siya. Are there
A large
ongoing
portion po.
assessments or plans to predict where new sinkholes might form or existing ones that might, collapse or might
Once
worsen?
triggered.
Yes po. Well, at this point in time, in terms of forecasting, okay, or identifying exactly when it would happen, that would be very, very difficult, no? Just like an earthquake, we don't know exactly when it would happen, but we know it's going to happen. That's the reason why when we do this kind of hazards, it's important that we cascade the results immediately and inform them of the potential risk that they face, because we don't exactly know when it's going to happen. Ano po? It can be within 3 years, 10 years, or even hundreds of years. But the point is that other than just telling them their situation, we also educate them of what to look out for that indicates the ground subsidence or the ground instability, which I actually mentioned a while ago.
Yes.
So sila mismo, these things would not work if our information is not cascaded to the local. So yung local po, sila doon, importante that they are educated about it.
Yes. So how is your office, the Mines and Geosciences Bureau, working with LGUs to manage land use plans, especially for the the affected northern Cebu, and enforce a rezoning dun sa high-risk areas? Sino ba yung...
Yes po.
There was also a question. Who will recommend and who will declare a no-build zone? Should it be
Yes
the
po.
LGU or kayo?
Actually po, lahat naman po ng lands ng LGU are required to come up with a comprehensive
Yes.
land use plan, and then they need to revise it, and they are also required to utilize different types of geohazards maps. It's not just about sinkhole. There are a lot of geohazards, di ba po? Meron tayong earthquake, ground rupture, meron tayong landslide, and so on and so forth. So it's really up for the LGUs to come up with a land use plan, and with their land use plan, with using or maybe superimposing the geohazards, then they can actually seek the comments or the guidance coming from the science agencies, including FIVOLCS as well as the Mines and Geosciences Bureau. So from there, we can actually recommendatory po kasi ang mga science agencies, ano. So at the end of the day, with all of this information, it's really up for the LGUs to whether to implement it or not. But of course, in high-risk areas, we strongly encourage that they declare an area, okay, a no-build zone if it's really necessary in the form of ordinance. Kasi ordinance po, that would make it legal.
Yes. Like in the case of San Remigio na ang dami talagang sinkholes.
Majority of them are there.
Yeah, ang big cluster siguro or nandun located. During ba sa land use development ng isang LGU, kinoconsult din ba yung like FIVOX or the Mines and Geosciences Bureau as to the, saan yung safe and at other pa
Yes
areas?
po. Well, yes po. In fact po, we have a formal information education campaign wherein a set of geologists go and GIS, they go to a particular LGU and provide an IEC, including their risk exposure map. And that is an opportunity for the LGUs to actually revisit their land use plan. So there are a number of ways of doing that through our IEC. But in the same way, at the same time, there are some LGUs who contact the DENR-MGB for assistance.
Ano yung
So,
IEC
ganun po yun. Ano po?
What is IEC?
Information Education Campaign.
Okay,
So
sorry.
pumupunta is at least one day when we go there, we show them the map, we show them their exposure, we tell them what the implication would be. So yung mga ating mga disaster managers at saka yung mga planners po natin ng mga LGUs, they attend and then they show their from the hazards, from their understanding of their hazards, then they now check their land use. Kasi nga po, we are not here for the MGB as a science agency, we are not there to actually dictate but to guide them.
Yes,
po?
understand.
Kasi syempre, alam naman po natin sila ang mas nakakaintindi
Yes.
ng pangangailangan ng kanilang mga nasasakupan po.
Okay.
My question actually is this time closer to home, no? And then I know you've answered this earlier, but can you elaborate further about what kind of geotechnical or subsurface studies that are required before putting up a high-rise building in Cebu City?
Okay po. Actually po, there is a DNR administrative order, the 2000-28. That administrative order requires all project proponents, private or government, to conduct an engineering, geological, and geohazard assessment as an additional requirement for the issuance of an environmental compliance certificate. So we're talking about big projects here, for example, the resorts, building. So if you are able, so the proponent would have to hire a private geologist to come up with this kind of assessment and report, okay, so that this report would now be reviewed by the Mines and Geosciences Bureau. The essence of that kind of administrative order is to identify and understand the physical conditions that would affect a project. For example po, kung flood-prone area, then anong gagawin mo doon sa building mo? Maybe yung first floor, yung second floor, gawin nyo lang parking, tapos doon na lang kayo sa taas. If there are sinkholes in that area, baka you need actually grouting so that you can address that kind of physical conditions. So there are two things that we want to address in an environmental compliance certificate. One is what is the impact of the project doon sa environment? And in the case of DAO 2028, what is the impact of the physical conditions on the project itself?
Okay.
So meron po tayong ganung batas.
Yeah, so mandatory na pala to. There's already on compliance to for getting an ECC, right?
Yes po, yes
Okay.
po.
Doc, may nagtanong, possible po ba na magiging underground caves yung ibang mga sinkholes?
Opo naman, opo. Actually kaya po tayo may kuweba sa Palawan, sa Cebu, sa Bohol. It's because of that po.
Another thing pala, ang Cebu City, we're very dependent, not Metro Cebu, we're very dependent on water underground for our source, for our, water supply. How will yung over-extraction of water, further contribute to sinkhole problems?
Actually, ma'am, yung ating groundwater extraction, that could also initiate ground subsidence. Kung mas mabilis po ang extraction natin kaysa replenishment ng groundwater, that would cause ground subsidence din po. Okay? So that has been demonstrated elsewhere. No?
I think,
But
yeah.
In the same way po, syempre we have to also be careful when our groundwater is hosted by limestone because yung sinasabi ko nga po, di ba, nadidissolve siya ng rainwater, so medyo malalaki-laki yung butas niya. So in terms of the way it filters water, hindi siya as effective as other types of rocks. So that's why we have to be very careful when we manage water there. Kaya nga, wag tayo magtatapon ng basura, mga ganyan, no? And we have to be very careful with what we are draining doon sa surface at papunta sa ilalim, because limestone aquifers or nag-host ng groundwater is very much prone to contamination.
Yun. So, it's very concerning if households, hindi yung households na yung bottomless septic tanks. Because
Yes, that's why.
Ito talagang pupunta dun sa
So na
aquifer.
it drips.
Yeah, so
Oo,
Or
yun
seeps.
po.
yeah.
So,
Yes po.
my next question, Doc, has something to do still with kanang skyrise. And the context of the question
Ang
is
dami
more-
na kasi niyan sa Cebu, Doc.
Oh, and the context of the question is really on educating the viewers, no? Because we can also see that Cebu skylines, they're expanding towards reclaimed areas, no? Like South Road
Yes,
properties, no? And so from a geological standpoint, how different are the risks, no? Compared to limestone zones, no? When they are building in reclaimed areas.
That's a very challenging question, I would say, because it really depends on how you reclaim it as well. Because it's not just a matter of geological, but you have to also be sensitive about the needs of the province or the LGUs, especially in a fast-growing community, or pag very fast ang population natin, there are situations that you really need to expand.
Yes.
So that's the reason why in terms of reclamation, we have to undergo a series of assessments, and that would be part of the issuance of the ECC. So the ECC process po. Kaya nga, it's not as easy, it's not that's something that's easy to answer, because every project may have an environmental impact. Example, when we talk about Cebu, I know you are very sensitive. Cebu is known also as dive sites, di ba po? Sa mga
Yes,
coral
bual-bual,
reefs, mga
yeah.
ganyan. Yan po yung mga ganyan. Pero when we do have this kind of development, it can affect the coral reefs.
Yes.
That's why we need to conduct nga yung mga di ba, cost-benefit analysis,
Yes.
impact, and everything sa tourism. So it's more of a holistic approach po yan eh. So it's not just a matter of a geological perspective eh.
Okay. Doc,
So that's why I think it's a challenging question.
yes. How safe is limestone as a filling material for a reclamation project?
Filling material.
Yes. Yun yung ginagamit na finifill. Kasi sabi mo, limestone is kind of not stable. Soluble siya, di ba? So,
Yes. In other countries, traditionally, the ideal way of doing it, for example, sabihin natin sa isang area, is yung reclamation natin na material, kukunin dun sa dagat, sa malayong parte ng dagat. The reason for that is that if we put in materials that are different ang composition niya doon sa surroundings, no, it can alter the chemistry. And altering the chemistry of the water can have an impact on the biodiversity or ecosystem. So yun yung ideal. But limestone personally, limestone as a recommendation material is not as appropriate, okay, is not as appropriate as other kinds of rocks. So that's the reason why reclamation, although I believe that reclamation, yung mga engineers naman, I'm sure they're doing geotechnical studies. But as an engineer, they should also understand kasi yung how the substrate or yung reclaimed material would react in the future.
Yeah.
Kasi 'di ba sa geotechnical nagte-test tayo ng bato. So pagte-test ng bato, yun yung results natin ngayon. But in the future, pwede kasi mag-deteriorate yung bato 'di ba po?
yes.
Okay, so pag-deteriorate. So yung geotechnical result may not be applicable anymore. But I believe naman po that the engineers and scientists are actually working together, no.
Yeah,
So
but-
may limitations din naman siguro yung why they're using limestone. I do not know really. I'm not in authority to say na bakit limestone ginamit niyo. I do not know. But
Yes.
to be realistic about it, when we talk about science, limestone as a reclamation material is not as good as other types of rocks.
Okay. So, well, as to its stability and everything that has science will answer that, but hindi ito yung if you use the limestone, kasi nagiging alien siya dun sa area. Kasi
Opo.
tubig yun, di ba? Tubig dagat. So,
Yes po.
although limestone is parang dagat din sila galing kasi they're dead corals na nag-form ng ganun. But hindi masyadong na-explain yung effect
Oo,
on
pero-
the biodiversity
Oo
ng
po.
isang area.
Yes po, pero again po ma'am, let me also add, in many cases, when they encounter kahit reclaimed area, yung mga engineers, they design the foundation. Sometimes, if kumari, liquefiable siya, liquefaction prone, is ganyan yung mahina yung substrate niya, binabypass nila yung mahinang mga bato or layers do sa ilalim. Tapos pina-found nila doon sa mga mas matitibay na bato. Kasi it doesn't mean naman po, pag limestone ang nasa ibabaw na nakikita nyo, sa ilalim ay limestone pa rin. So hindi ganun po. So sa geology, like Cebu, sa central part ng Cebu, 'di ba po, iba po yung bato doon eh. Tapos pero sa western at saka eastern, iba rin limestone doon. Pero if you drill at a certain depth, siguro you might encounter the older rocks na hindi limestone.
Okay.
So ganun po siya. It's not as if, but again, the decision in terms of reclamation, effect on the environment, biodiversity versus the needs of the LGUs, of course, that would be a province-wide decision po.
Okay. So, ito din, kasi mayroong ongoing reclamation, but ang province of Cebu has ceased quite a number of quarry operations. So, ma-affected talaga yung reclamation. Just going back to the 24 more sinkholes na discovered, this is after yung 70 natin, Doc?
Yeah, this is the new additional 24 po. This is on top of what was identified previously by the first group.
Okay. So, so far, saan to ang distribution ng 24? Are they all in one place?
No, hindi naman po. But I don't have the map with me right now.
Okay, Doc. Okay, so that was parang Geology 101 talaga tong nangyari this afternoon. So very maganda yung mga insights na nakuha namin sa iyo, Doc. But yun lang, na yung LGU cannot really proceed without yung sa report nyo.
Yes po, ideally po, no, because our report serves as an important input to the plans of the LGU. They can proceed if they want to, of course, basta nasa legal bounds po tayo, but science information is something that really needs to be considered when talk about long-term planning or long-term sustainability po.
I'm actually down to just my last two questions, Doc. And so my second to the last question actually is, this is already for our viewers, no? So how will everyone stay informed, no? And to stay safe, no? Because this publicity might eventually wither, no? As the aftershocks would reduce, no? And we know that we always move from one controversy to the next. But how do we stay informed, no?
Okay po. Well, first of all, we have to learn from our experiences. We have to be more observant of what we see in the surroundings, because what we see can be some sort of a lesson for us. So if we see an area as a landslide prone, obviously you have to see what is in that slope, okay, that made it like landslide prone. So you can always consult the Mines and Geosciences Bureau for that by looking at our website, because we have already IEC materials that inform the different stakeholders of what would make an area unstable. So this is regardless of a landslide, regardless if this is about karst or maybe a flooding. So there are various avenues by which we could actually learn. Hazards Hunter is there, which was developed by DOST FIVOLS. They can also consult that. Okay, but obviously there are some limitations when we talk about maps, because it depends on the scale of the map. Ano pong ibig ko sabihin? Kapag nakasakay kayo ng eroplano, sa taas po tayo, hindi natin makikita yung bubong. Pag unti-unting naglaland yung eroplano, unti-unting na nating nakikita yung bubong. So, ang point ko lang po, the details that you see on the map depends kung gaano yung scale na naka-indicate doon sa mapa. That's the reason why producing the map is one thing, but also teaching them how to read maps is another thing. That's the reason why the DNR-MGB makes sure, okay, that the reading of maps is one of the components in the IEC po.
And sige.
Badayon.
And then for those who are living or are planning to invest ba on high-rise developments, should they be concerned about this sinkhole developments or should they stay reassured?
I cannot answer that question because hindi ko naman nung nakita kung paano tinayo yung building.
Yes.
Okay. Sige, but more of confidence level lang ba? Given
Yeah.
the requirements that developers are actually asked to comply and they comply.
If they are able to comply, if it undergo that Dow 2000-2010, the EIA process, maybe. But again, it's not for me to
Okay.
actually answer because so the recent events about the buildings, the measures that were implemented, di ba? Parang ganun po. Pero I don't want to touch on that issue po anymore.
Okay, sige.
This is my last question, Doc.
Yes po.
Ano po yung mga challenges din po ng MGB in conducting all this mapping for mga hazard areas?
Actually po, the challenge here right now for us, to be frank about it, we need more geologists. We need more plantilla.
Oh,
Because,
so walang
for example, in the regional offices, we only have like 8 geologists working. And so if you're dealing with Region 6, you do have a lot of islands and you need to deal with different hazards. So landslide, flood, cars, not also to mention that there are other activities such as groundwater exploration. So plantilla is something that is very important for the MGB.
So it's
But at the end of the day, of course, syempre, isa sa mga pinaka-importanting challenge din is yung sustainability na information na kinakascade po namin. I do hope, I encourage the LGUs na i-upload siya, i-pass on yung information sa susunod na mga officials because every time that there's an election baka mawala din.
Yes,
Then you have set of
correct.
officials mawala ulit then back to zero tayo. So what I am saying is that when it comes to disaster management, just don't think of FIVOS, just don't think of MGB or maybe Pag-asa because disaster management is a whole government approach that also requires the full cooperation of all stakeholders po.
okay. When you said dun sa plantilla, wala lang plantilla available or we're having a difficulty hiring of geologists?
It's more of the limited plantilla po.
Okay. Ideally, like for the entire right now for the entire
What's the
MGB, how many po ba kayo?
Let me just inform you, like for example, for the central office, we have at least 20 na COS. So yun, wala kaming plantilla ng mga ganun. But again, it's not easy to answer that kasi depende rin ho kung what regions are we talking about ho. But definitely we need more technical people.
Okay. Yeah,
So yun po.
To have a good decision, kailangan science back or data driven talaga. So sige lang,
Yes
Doc,
po.
we'll try to cascade that to the to
the
the
decision
public, to the
makers.
decision makers kasi na-highlight ang requirement, ang importance ng science when things like this happen. And just like dun just like sa FIVOX, they need something like 300 seismic radars. But right now we have 120 plus. And for us to complete the 300 needed for us para maka-forecast or maka-send right away information of an earthquake, it's like in the next 40 years. So by the time makomplete na natin yung 300, outdated na yung technology, Doc.
Opo. Yun
Okay,
po.
so Doc, thank you. Any last message for our viewers?
Sa lahat po ng ating mga kapwa Pilipino, ay lagi po tayo maging mahanda. Gaya po ng sinasabi ko dati, failure to prepare is preparing to fail. Maraming po salamat.
Thank you, Dr. Queaño. Okay, so that was Dr. Karlo Queaño ng MGB Manila Gyud. Pero ano yung 24 new follow-up lang natoon niya? O pila ni asa ni dapita ang 24?
The distribution, no?
75 plus 24, that's almost 100 already. This is on top of the earlier 198 the IDJ.
That's
There's an
that they
MGB.
previously
there's
had
an MGB,
before the earthquake.
there's an MG report that says to date ang MGB post-disaster assessment then documented katong 14 in Bogo incidents in our Cebu. From the 198 sinkholes that were previously assessed in Bogo and San Remeo before the earthquake. So basin niyag mahurot ang simba ko lang.
No, but sige, that was also the context of the question whether Sanrem, for example, is already an area of focus, but the term that he used is high risk, no? But he did not still conclude, no,
Yeah.
na it is a high risk
At this
area
time,
at this
yeah.
time.
Siguro ang akong worry ay na basig na concentrate siya in one area, one city. So dili para na ako ba just to be safe bitaw dili lang kita magbalik o mag-build dito. Okay, there's a nearby fault line. You what kay ba when it's moving and
Correct.
yeah, when you mag-invest tag mga balay DJ
And kato sa and that's also one of the reasons why I raised kaganina na incidentally the epicenter is in Bogo pero the concentration of the sinkholes are in Sanrem.
So,
And the difference between the figures are actually big, you know?
More 50% kay
Correct.
40 and
16.
16.
Oh.
So murag 50% good. So pasalamatan ni Arnel Beltran nga nangutanan to kadina si Rico Kabihe og si Corsino Kilosha. Manisle mga uban nga is joining us right now for our discussion. So I think si BBM is coming to Bogo
Again?
tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
For a visit siguro og unsa ba kanang but mo lang gid na no before we even think of ang sulti bitaw ni OCD they are now on
Rebuilding. Rebuilding and rehabilitation.
Rehabilitation. So daghan kaayo ang areas nga like for example kanilang yun naigo ang City Hall. So it's within siya sa fault. Mo ra gyud siya if it's within naa siya near the fault line or dili maayo ang pagka-build. So nara gyud na siya. So I would like to believe nga dito siya sa kuan. Sa na-build lang siya near the fault line.
Although the limited photo that I saw about the post, I also don't know what was the motivation of the photo. But it actually...
Aesthetics lang ko no to. Pero ang tinuod ko no under the architectural or the engineering, katurag yun ko nung gamay. Ila lang gipadako.
Para it
pero
looks better.
Ni pasar yun to siya ko,
Okay.
no? Sa mukha sa ninyo. Anyway.
Although naliki ang structure.
Oh.
Even if sufficient
Mo
siya.
lagi na bisag asa siya moigo. For example, miingon ta nga naigo siya sa fault line, then nga wa mo nagkonsulta before building the City Hall there, nga near siya sa fault line, di ba?
Correct.
Mo go through man gyud kaana nga
Sa process.
Okay, given sa ubo, the building code.
Um,
Yeah, ikaduha, if build siya compliance to ubo nga maka-survive siya of intensity or magnitude 8.
Intensity 8.
Intensity 8 naagi say something ato. So duha igo gid gihapon sa duha.
And it's not necessarily about kanang putting unnecessary spotlight on the structure ba, but it's a demonstration man good supposedly nga mura bitaw in the context of lead by example. So if we expect structures to be sturdy and compliant,
gobyerno kay nago
Correct.
mayor nagpuyo dito lisod sa kaistanan og gamayng uyog at risk ang atong local officials.
Correct.
There's vacuum in government simbako lang.
so murag it's a good way for government to reassure the citizens ba by also the integrity, the structural integrity of the structures that where government seats, no? Kay murag it creates man good a negative impression kung una silang naliki compared to the others.
Mao. Katong 2013 earthquake in Bohol, ang nahitabo sa Bohol kay mo siya detailed. Kay ang pika side ni Saka, ang pika side ning ubos, nabasag ka na nga observations or mga subsidence or pagsaka in
No,
the
actually
northern Cebu.
we covered that. Kaya I think when we interviewed Director Dacolcol, we asked man about San Remigio na sad, no? Nga nisaka ang tubig sa pier.
Ay, katong
And
Hagnaya
then-
ba to?
Yes, and then ni-recede ang Sabugo, no? So there na movement yun. And we asked gani if it was temporary and he said that it's already permanent.
Pwede nito siya, di man siya sponge, mabalik siya.
Pero mahadlok
no?
pa siguro takong siso, no?
Okay na lang itong permanent kaysa mo season nga. Kanang high tide, low tide, nga nang mag-usab-usab ang high tide o low tide. Paglaro niya, DJ, oy.
That's scary.
Mas scary na siya. Nagligo-ligo ka niya, nikalit lang. High tide, magkalit nga nang huinas pa manunta ko. So maana siya, mga igala. Nindot kaayo ang insights nga atong nakuha ni Dr. Queaño kaganina nga kanang mo gina, I think ang atong maayong opinion or decision is guided yun na sa right information na atong makuha. So subay ta, visit mo sa Mines and Geosciences website, follow mo sa Sunstar para padayon ang mga saktong informasyon nga atong mahatag ninyo. So ugma mga higala, atong atangan si Engineer Lloyd Adlawan sa finally kay ni last week man ta to niya na not feeling well siya, so niingon tong iyang gipadadiri that he's coming here tomorrow Friday to explain what happened to the Azela property development.
And I actually wish him well so that he will feel well tomorrow.
Yeah, para ma-explain na gid niya finally. I think deserve lang sad pod ang mga tao for an explanation.
So at this time daghan yung kayong concern sa iyang health, no? I hope he will really take care of himself, no?
para masabtan siya. So, hope to see you tomorrow, Engineer Adlawan. And that wraps up the edition of Beyond the Headlines. We hope today's conversation helped shed light on the bigger picture behind the story.
And we'd like to thank our guest, Dr. Karlo Queaño, for helping us connect the dots in ways that matter.
I'm Mildred Galarpe.
And I'm DJ Moises.
Thank you and good
afternoon.